Hey, welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit where the inner warrior shines in their light. Today I have Whitedove Gannon. She is a serial entrepreneur, mother of five, and just someone that I came across on my Facebook platform. Loved her story, loved what she's about, and she was gracious enough to join us. So, Whitedove, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to it.
I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day. Right off the bat, you're going to get this question wherever you go. It's a lifelong thing. Is that your real name?
Yes, yes, it is my real name, my birth name from my father. And it was, truth be told, it was meant to be just kind of a little rebellious streak. If I was a boy, I was going to be named after my father, Eddie Jr. But about 2 months before I was born, he came to my mom and said, let's name her White Dove if it's a girl. And here I am.
There you go. My one of my friends, his name is Bear. And I had to ask him the same question,
Yeah.
because he gets that all the time. So one would presume from the outside that it comes from like an Indian heritage or something like that, especially living in Colorado.
Mhm.
But no, your dad just was like, "No, we're gonna name her White Dove."
Yep. That's the only reason behind it.
I
Yeah.
love it. But it's probably been both a blessing and a curse, having to explain it so much, but then also it embodies this spirituality and this free spirit and
Yes.
this essence that you're now today, right?
Indeed, it does. I often have told him, especially in my latter years, that he branded me, whether he realized it or not, because it sticks and people don't know if it's a business name, and so the question comes up all the time. But it's an icebreaker and it has served me well in having conversations where people are just, curious, and then it breaks the ice to, more profound conversations past that. But it's done me a world of service. But yes, if I had a nickel for every time I've been asked, I would have a lot of nickels.
A lot of nickels for sure. You're currently living in Colorado? Did you grow up in Colorado or did you migrate
Colorado
there?
Colorado is my home state. I grew up my high school years in Idaho, small town in Idaho, but I was born in California. I don't
Hmm.
have much memory of living in the Bay Area of California, some blips and, small memories and stuff, but I was young when we left. Spent a significant amount of time in my, teen years in Idaho and then moved to Colorado when I was 18.
Nice. And did you meet your husband via college or just out on a trail? How'd you meet your husband?
No, you want to know the funny short story? I'll give you the
The
nutshell
Reader's
of it.
Digest version?
Yeah, the Reader's Digest version. Actually, the reason I came to Colorado is because I met him in Idaho and I was like, grand adventure, let me go off. And this was in 95, so people can do the math all they want, but it was back before cell phones, before social media, before the internet was a presence in our lives. So I really kind of fell off the face of the earth to my current world then, when I was just like, I'm going to go on this grand adventure for 30 days. Someone's going to show me around. He's very kind, he's very, very sweet. Zero idea I was moving, zero idea I wasn't coming back, zero idea that I was actually putting one foot in front of the other, paving my future path. But lo and behold, here we are. So
And five children, 30 years of marriage. Things are great.
yep, five children. They range from 15 to 25.
Wow,
Yes.
that's a nice range. Um, Colorado is I used to travel a lot, just get in the car and drive. And at one point I drove from coast to coast, and this was back before cell phones and back before, Google Maps, and you actually had
Yes.
to open up a map and decide where you wanted to go.
Right.
And Colorado, when I was doing that, was my favorite state. I had never been through there, but even the rest stops were great. I mean, it was so beautiful. So,
I love Colorado. It is definitely a very, very beautiful state. The weather is desirable. A little bit of snow. We don't get as much as people think. People think in the wintertime Colorado is just blanketed in snow. Not true. The mountains, yes, but we want them to be, so it has watershed. But outside of that, it's very ambient on the temperature and the seasons. We get all four seasons, but they're not extreme. So
mhm.
yes, Colorado is beautiful.
What's interesting about the snowfall in Colorado, especially in the Denver Boulder area, it's dry. You can't even like make a snowman out of it.
Yeah,
So like there's a lot of it, but you could blow it away. It's
fluffy. It is
yeah,
definitely fluffy.
very fluffy. So um, in Colorado, as this grand adventure unfolded before you and you started to take root down there, you mentioned off camera that you and your husband started a sustainable farm.
So before that, before we started the sustainable farm, we had a construction company here for
Okay.
13 years. So entrepreneurship has just been my world from all my adult life, I guess. But we started a construction company. We had that. In the middle of it, we went to Kansas for 4.5 years. And we were on 160 acres in Kansas. And that's where we did the sustainable farm, is out there. The reason we came back to Colorado is it wasn't, the stars were not aligned, we'll just put it that way, to be able to continue that direction outside of our own control. We just didn't, the doors were closing. And so it was back to Colorado. We came, and from there, kind of picked up the pieces to figure out what we wanted to do. That's when we ultimately shut down the construction business, because we took that out to Kansas and continued it out there as well, with the sustainable farm that we built from the ground up with zero experience farming. But that has never stopped my entrepreneurial soul. So we made it work. Before even sustainable farming was really kind of a catchphrase back in 2006. So we were probably one of the first few that took meat products direct to consumer at the farmers market. We were certified and licensed by the state. We had refrigerated coolers that we brought them in. We sold it
Wow.
direct to the public by the cut, not by the half or whole, which had always been, the traditional norm up until that point. So a little ahead of my curve, or ahead of the curve, ahead of the time, doing that as well.
Well, Idaho's a really pretty state as well. And as a young girl growing up in Idaho, were you sitting looking at the stars going, one day I want to be in construction and have my own farm? Was that your dream? I mean, what gets you
No,
into that path?
no, my teenage self envisioned my adult self as actually going into law enforcement and then moving on to being an attorney. That
Oh,
was
wow.
in my mind where that was my path I was going to set out on. So my grand adventure for 30 days into Colorado was only going to be a grand adventure, but it ended up being, something much greater.
I sorry, I just am picturing someone getting arrested by white dove. I
No,
mean,
it wasn't meant to be. It
yeah.
truly wasn't meant to be.
What prompted the construction route then?
So our construction business was more of uh an option for developers. So we weren't in traditional construction where we were doing some of the skilled trades, such as maybe concrete or framing, or the most known construction trades. We did what was called a reverse land development agreement, where we installed telephone main line for new residential subdivisions. So we worked directly with the big bell companies, and then became a liaison between them and the developer, because oftentimes the developer would have trench open, and the telephone companies were so large, they just said, well, we don't care, we're not going to make your deadline. So we were able to save the developers money by coming in and guaranteeing trench line.
Well, that's really cool. You took a norm and made it your own as well.
Yeah.
In your entrepreneurial heart and entrepreneurial spirit, I'm fascinated by this 160 acres sustainable farm. That, I mean, in and of itself is an undertaking. And I think in today's world and post-COVID environment, with the hot potato that everyone's playing with their politics,
Yes.
everyone envisions, man, I wish I could grow my own stuff and have my own food. What prompted you guys to say, yeah, we're going to do 160 acres of that?
Well, so the land was 160 acres, so we didn't choose 160 acres. It had been in my husband's father's family
Oh,
since the turn of the century, well, since 1900s. So we went out there it hadn't been worked for decades. The house had been being rented out. The land was being leased out to, some cattle farmers just for grazing. There was a few 40-acre parcels that were for hay growth. They were growing hay, and obviously that they were driving income off of crops there. So that would be an opportunity for a lot of people to be able to have good hay ground. Now, when we decided to do the sustainable farm, we didn't move out there in order to do that. We were gonna run cattle, and then dial up internet, because it's in the country out in southeast Kansas. There was someone that I caught wind of that was out of the East Coast, but a couple of people had picked up on his practices in the local area. And I thought, I don't know anything about farming, but I could do that. That I could do. And so we started with no experience. We got goats, then we got layers, chickens, and then we got let's see, I got my first milk cow I saved for $1,000 by selling bread. No kidding, back then even. And bought my first milk cow, then was able to legally sell the milk from the farm, and people wanted that product. And so quickly had a following for that. And then I was at the farmers markets, bringing the bread, bringing, showcasing some of the things that we were building towards. And so built myself a little email list from that of about 350 people overall that wanted to have an idea of what it looks like from a city girl, because at that point I had been a city girl, that I hadn't ever been raised on a farm and didn't know it, learning it from the ground up. So it was almost they were living vicariously through my experience of something that a lot of people even then had dreamed of. Now, I'm not going to romanticize it. It is hard work to do it and scale it the way we did it. Hobby farming can be done much at a much smaller scale and much more manageable. When I go in, I go big, right? I go big or go home, and I test my own limits that way, because the growth curve, I know how to learn and grow at the same time. And so I was just like, what can we do? How can we meet the demand? How can we feed the population? How can we educate people? How can we do all that? So I started doing tours on the acreage. We had, by the fourth year, we went from nothing in 2006, just moving there August of 2006, to when we left in at the beginning of 2011. Our last season was in 2010. That year we raised 27 hogs, 4 steers, 900 meat birds, had
Wow.
150 layers, 30 turkeys for the holiday, and we had 3 milk cows and 1 milk goat,
Wow. Starting from nothing.
starting from nothing.
And everything that I'm hearing so far just oozes grit and determination and can-do-it attitude. Where did that stem from as a little girl? Somewhere in there, that seed is planted. So where did all of that come from?
I've actually often thought about that and thought, what's the differentiator? Why do I consistently go into businesses or create a business or, go in a direction of generating revenue myself as an entrepreneur and not seem to fear it? And I didn't look at it that way back when we had the construction business or the sustainable farm. I didn't see it that way even until probably about 2017, 2018, when I started getting into the online space, because I was like, this is very strange to me that people don't see the possibility that exists there. I don't understand why they don't see it. So I've spent some time, kind of analyzing myself to figure out why. And the only thing I can come back to as my young girl self to where this came from is that obviously my name is very unconventional. My parents raised us unconventional. They were hippie-ish. They were live off the land. They were very much, I'm definitely a product of the 70s and that culture. And so they're not in a rebellious way, but in kind of an unschooled, unconventionally educated child in the 70s. And my parents really wanted to go that direction because that was the sign of the times. And so for that, I believe I'm oldest of 8 siblings too. And so
Wow.
obviously, as my parents continue to grow a family, there's less attention given, not less love, less direct attention, direct conversations and such, it becomes a big unit, a kind of a community unit. And in that, I believe that my curiosity, us children as curiosity seekers, were really kind of unbridled to a degree that we were never told we couldn't do something. So I see a lot of times that parents will say, oh, no, 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 for the sake of safety or for the sake of, well-being for a child, say, no, 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 you can't do that. You can't do that. The way I was raised back in the 70s and 80s, people would probably keel over at this point because it was so unguarded. And that was a time that we lived in. It was much safer to be able to live that kind of a life then. And so from that, I was rarely told, you can't do that. My imagination as a child would run wild, and I would have these crazy cool ideas or go off into grand adventures in the forest in Idaho, or go off on, once I was able to drive, go take drives to see uncharted, territory or uncharted countryside in, around where I lived in Idaho. But nobody ever said, Whitedove, don't do that. That's dangerous. Whitedove, you can't do that. That's dangerous. And so I think innately I just grew up without people saying you can't do something. So I didn't understand that context. When I got into entrepreneurship, I don't go into an opportunity in my mind. I see something, I want to pursue it. And there's a learning lesson for me as well as inside of it. I want to go in that direction. And I don't really give myself an opportunity to say, I can't. Now, being that I'm on the maturer side of that coin, let me just say, now I can analyze data. Now I can analyze feedback. I can see the pursuits that I've had in the past. I understand what I didn't know going into it. I've been able to look at those pictures of my, snapshots of my former self and say, this is what I didn't know. This is what I needed to learn. This is what I didn't know I needed to learn at that time, and subsequently continue to evolve and grow in my entrepreneurial world that way.
Yeah, there's many of us who are children of the 70s, and the street light was our alarm clock to go home.
It really was.
We rode our bikes all over the neighborhood. We hung out with people. We learned different things. We educated ourselves by
Yes.
doing things instead of sitting and watching it on YouTube. And
Yes.
many of us developed one of two paths. Either you're um, a laborer, 9 to 5, that's your gig,
Right.
or you're an entrepreneur and you just try everything and are fearless of all of it. Fortunately, I took that path that you did as well.
Yes.
But I relate it back to what you said of being a product of the 70s.
Yeah.
My parents were working 2 and 3 jobs. We had to fend for ourselves and learn and grow and
Right.
do.
Right.
And so it's vastly different than the world today. How is your entrepreneurial spirits, which by the way I admire and love, which is so cool to me that you're doing that. How is that translated into the 5 children that you have?
Well, they grew up into a household of entrepreneurship their whole lives. They don't know anything other than the ability to dream and put one foot in front of the other and work towards it. Now the goalposts shift, and so I know that. And so in that wisdom, being able to say, okay, yes, do it and tell me what you find out about yourself. Do it and pursue what that looks like. And so not really trying to box them in, give them the opportunity to pursue whatever path that looks like for them, whether it's college, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's a combination of both, whether it's to hold a very good job, because I have adult children at this point too, and I've got all ranges of it. Some are entrepreneurial, some have side hobbies, side gigs, some aren't sure if they want to pursue them, but they enjoy them and they don't want to lose the love of enjoying it. And so there's a lot of openness to it, but I encourage all of it. I encourage I have children in college. I have children that are entrepreneurial. I have children that are in college and entrepreneurial. I have children that work a traditional job in a very stable environment. I have children that are, finding their way in what it looks like for them. But the biggest thing as a parent, and I'll say this coming without the entrepreneurial part of it, biggest thing as a parent is I wanted to give them the freedom to be able to find who they are without me interjecting who I think they should be. I want
Mhm.
them to find that, and I will support that all day long. Are they going to make decisions that I don't always agree with? Absolutely. But I also want to see it through their lens. So the the doors of communication have always been open, and we've always had conversations. They have seen me succeed. They have seen me struggle. They've seen their dad stressed out. They've seen the jobs come in. They've seen the jobs not come in, all of that. They've seen all that. They've lived it. They've lived very flush times and very hard times, because we've had all of those. And so inside of that, those don't define the person. How we move through them is what actually is the growth prospect that I want for them. And that's what that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest gift they can give me, is to continue to always move forward.
And I think as parents, and I've had this conversation with other people on this show and in other platforms that I've spoken at, you know, too many parents try to live vicariously through their
Yes.
children and
Yes.
determine what they will or won't do instead of letting them explore all possibilities. And the other part, because of the wisdom that we've had by being down the road, we don't want that same heartache for our children. So we try to preemptively guide them away from the pain or the hardship. And that in and of itself is not fair, because it's, you know, and this is a lesson that I've helped work out with my wife. You sometimes have to let them go through that pain, even though we can see
Yes.
where it's going to lead, because that's how they grow. And I equate that to the butterfly scenario,
Yes.
because when, you know, when a butterfly emerges from the cocoon, it's the struggle of getting out of the cocoon that actually strengthens its wings to be able to fly. And if
Right.
someone comes and tries to help it by, you know, cutting open the cocoon or making it easier, that butterfly actually dies because it didn't strengthen itself.
Right.
And you know, it's a thing way too many parents want to do. We want to avoid the pitfalls and hardships, and sometimes, you know, the nicest thing we can do for a parent is let them step on it themselves.
Indeed. And that is the burden to bear as a parent, as a mother. That's the biggest thing, is because it may not be detrimental. There are deciding factors that, you know, life lessons that, you know, things that they pursue. And I also have to check my bias, because just because I may have had a bad experience with a decision, or a bad experience with a you know, a path in life, maybe a less than savory path and a decision, just because of that, I cannot project that outcome, that bias onto them, because it's a whole different set of circumstances, a whole different world. And who am I to say, hey, don't try this, or hey, be careful of this, when it may actually pan out well for them. And me, by me doing that, would be doing that, the very, you know, analogy you gave with the butterflies, crippling them from something that would have been great.
I had one parent the other day talk about how they love the fact that their interests are not their children's interests. So when they get to experience it with their child, they get to experience it through their child's eyes. And, you know, uh, I love to golf. And if I taught my son to play golf, well, then I'd be experiencing it through my eyes. But, you know, he loves archery, and so when I go watch him on the archery range, now I get to see, you know, experience it with him, but see it through his eyes instead of my own. And I'm curious, being a serial entrepreneur and having entrepreneurial children, are there certain endeavors where they've come to you and wanted to partner with you, and are there certain areas where you've just kind of got to stand by and be the cheerleader?
At this point, it's really more the cheerleader. I'd say that if any involvement would have been giving them an opportunity to work with me to, you know, kind of to springboard their craft or whatever it is. I have one that is in merchandise and creates products. And a lot of my oldest, our oldest, he worked with me in the social media world years ago, before he was branching off to be entrepreneurial. And so he got a good taste of that. And I don't attribute anything to what he learned directly to me, because this, you know, online social media world evolves at a rapid pace. So he has outpaced me a hundredfold at this point. My daughter, who's entrepreneurial, is into photography, and I say when she was 15, I said, here's the thing. If you want to do photography, I will buy your first camera for you and I will be your test subject, because I also was not used to being on camera. I also was not used to having, using myself as part of my brand imagery, because that just hadn't been, something comfortable to me yet because I hadn't worked on it. So I said, Abby, you do it and we'll work on it this way. Find your zone of genius inside of it, because photography is very much the eye of the artist, the photographer themselves. And so, and each has their own uniqueness to what they capture, how they capture it, how they work through the photo, all of that. So I said, use my photographs that you take. I don't care what you do with them. I don't care how you edit them. I don't care what you test with it. I'll always use them because I need content anyway for my brand specifically. And so I just gave her free reign to do things. And then if there was some small little element of something that I wanted in it, maybe I wanted to be at a coffee shop this time, maybe I wanted to be out in nature, I said, you come up with what it looks like there, but these are kind of just the general locations that I would want to be in. And so then she would say, okay, Mom, I've got this idea. Let's go do some pictures. I need to see how this turns out. And then I would follow her lead on it as well. So
That's awesome. And as a as an entrepreneur who is into that, when did you start? Was it because of collaborating with your daughter in that fashion that you started becoming more comfortable in front of the camera and speaking and all of that stuff?
yes, I was a serial social media stalker all the way up until about 2018. I realized, so when I got into the online space, I actually had an accounting business for about 4 years and I was very successful with it. I knew I wanted to expand more because I was capped at that point. And I didn't want to go with employees at the time. I didn't want to bring in and train people. I didn't want to grow in that direction because we had already had employees before. And I felt like I've raised my children mostly. I don't want that world right now. So I thought, how do I diversify and expand this? And that's where the online space came into focus for me. My very first online program was a membership for very small solopreneurs who could not yet afford someone to keep an eye on their accounting and their books each month. And so I created a membership for them. That's where my foot into this in the online space started. And so from there, I really wanted to have an opportunity for people to circle me back around again, because I went off on a tangent on that
That's
and I
okay.
wanted to
Yeah.
make sure I answer your question.
Yeah, no, I was actually just trying to see how you
Ah,
became comfortable in front of the camera.
so from that, I realized that I was going to have to be the person of focus. I realized that I was going to have to be the person speaking to them. So it was easy when it was online and I could record videos. I got used to that. I figured out how to look all around and, screen share all of that. I got used to that. But then when it came to marketing, that was the one thing that was kind of a problem. I could grassroots market that service, that membership to people. And I did so locally and regionally and did quite well with it. But when I realized that my missing element was marketing and branding, I learned that I was going to have to get really good at seeing myself online.
And they say, and as a public speaker, I know when I started in that endeavor, they say that most people, 90% of people, that's one of their deathly fears is speaking in public. They, for whatever reason, and I find it funny in today's social media world, they're all willing to do the selfie, they're all willing to do these little blurbs, but oh, heaven forbid I get up and actually talk to somebody.
Yeah, well, but the speaking in front of people never bothered me though. I would get butterflies because I wanted it to land well. I wanted to be the topic to, make an impact as I was asked to do, but I was never afraid to go on screen, or in front of live people in general. But maybe that's also because I had learned easily to not focus on a fear such as that, what, in order for me to grow, this is a step I need to take. If in order for me to build my brand, this is something I'm going to need to do. So I would just be like, great, I'm not comfortable doing this at this point. But at the same time, I don't have a choice. It's either do it, move through the uncomfortableness and get used to it, or step back and not grow at all.
Well, you also have been around the block enough to know and have enough self-awareness to know that what you're speaking about for yourself is so atypical for
Right,
the average individual. You know,
right,
you are truly an exception to somebody who just embodies it, goes with it, and learns from it. Not everyone has that intuitive
indeed.
awareness to just, this is part of the process, jump in and do it.
Right. I'm
Yeah.
aware. I'm now acutely aware of that. Whereas, oftentimes early on, I may not have had an actual awareness of it, but I also didn't let it hold me back because, again, it was part of my learning curve and my journey. And so it was either not do anything and stay where I was, which was not an option, or move through the uncomfortable and figure it out.
Well, part of your moving through the uncomfortable is what connected me to
Yep.
reach out to you and want to have you come on. You shared a story of this bread on endeavor that you
Yep.
started. Can
This year.
you, yeah, can you explain a little more of what I'm referring to there?
Absolutely. So it's called Little Spouse Bread House, and it's a cottage bakery out of my home, certified or licensed. I have a certification from the state of Colorado to be able to do it. They have an option. They have a Cottage Food Act, which most states actually have. And so I have always baked for my family. I bootstrapped a farm back in 2006 baking bread. And so I knew bread, bread has been a part of my world often because it's creative. There's an element of science to it. There's an element of unpredictability to it. There's a lot of factors. And baking feeds an actual very human basic need. People need to eat. And so earlier this year, I thought, I really want to connect back to much more of a grassroots business idea, business concept. And I did not go into 2024 even thinking I was going to start a bread business. That wasn't even a focus until April. But immediately from the point that I was like, I'm going to do this. And I want to use this as a teaching lesson, but I also want to expand even my local area because I know that there are a ton of needs and a ton of people that just love the connection that I don't even know of. And I want to be able to bring something that I can do to them and be part of my community because this online world has been, so much of my world for the last 7 years. I was like, I'm craving that as well. And so I thought, I'm going to do sourdough. I'm going to do it. I'm going to perfect what I want to deliver, but I'm able to do that within about a 2-week turnaround, find out what I need to, adjust in order to make the product that I'm happy with. And so I decided that I was going to grow that business, build that business, and enjoy the process of it, and also reconnect back to something that I felt was just becoming diluted in the online space is that we have the opportunity to build a business, no matter if it's online or physical. We have that opportunity. Most people dream of it and don't put the foot forward. I want to show that you can put the foot forward. And a lot of people come to me at this point and say, yeah, but Whitedove, you've been doing this for years. You can sell courses. You can, you're a coach. You can get clients. You've got an audience, all this stuff. And I said, okay, fair. That's fair. Let me start from the ground up. Let me show you what can be done if you just go after it. And so from the point of end of April 20 something, I'll have to look back on my calendar, but it was towards the end of April. I said, this is what I want to do. So I quickly consumed a lot of the information that was out there. I research people doing things like this in other states. I research people not for the sellability of it, but for the conversation, the marketing, the grassroots element, what I wanted to bake, how I wanted to bake it, how I wanted to position it, how I wanted to market it, how I wanted to brand it, all of that. Again, my only advantage to this is because I understand this world enough that I was able to turn that around fairly quickly, but I make way less money in that business by selling a loaf of bread for $10, and I have a max capacity that I could do. I have made way less than I have ever made on my coaching or there's a scalability difference there, obviously. but it feeds my creativity. It expands the conversations with people in my world. It's an opportunity for me to touch back to something tangible, because I feel like maybe I was missing it, or I was becoming jaded, or I had been in this industry long enough to where I was just like, okay, I can see marketing tactics, across the board, just be like, and there's a lot of those things. I was like, but I also need to see it from the eyes of someone who is just starting out, who doesn't know these things. And I can remind myself to look that way. But I was like, let me touch back to this then. Let me start out something completely new that I have no audience for, from the ground up, long nights, um, plenty of dough failures, if I want to,
Yeah.
technically, plenty of this isn't 100% perfect. I gave away a ton of product because I was like baking, testing. I was like, well, my family's like sourdough'd out at this point. They're just like, Mom, you're making this nonstop. I was like, okay, cool. Adam, take this to work. I'd send it with my one kid, take this to work, because it's great products. I just didn't have a market to sell it yet. So I would just move it along, and give it out. And so then put all my marketing pieces together. I decided that instead of using online advertising for it, I was going to go with door hangers. I had created, built them myself in Canva, put them together, ordered them, and had my youngest son, paid him $20 an hour to go hang those on some doors in our local area, because we live in a small town, but large enough to where there's plenty of people that can fill my capacity that way. So then word of mouth took off, and then, everybody can pre-order. And then I added a little element to it that made it kind of catchy. And people now, just like last week, came by because they're like, we've seen you on social media. We wanted to come see your bread box because it's on wheels, and it's unique in its own element. And my husband built that, and it's rustic and it's fun, and it's just something for people to, come by and see, and then buy product from if they want to. And so the whole adventure is just, what do I want to do next with it? What do I want to do, what do I want to do with this? And I will continue to bake bread. I love that. That is my favorite part. I've made tons of products now at this point on the sourdough end of it, but the bread is my favorite. But it's not money that I've made before, but that doesn't matter, because it is actually so wholesome to me, and fills that gap of what I was looking for when I was like, I want something that's community based. I want something that comes back to the tangible. I want to be out there and have conversations with people. I want people to come by and feel free to be able to see the person making their food, talk to the person making their food, and for them to, have that reconnection, because we're in a time where that is important as well. So that's really the whole purpose of it. And then to be able to take that experience and move that back into my online world, because of course all my branding is still the same. I set that up with its own pages, its own branding, its own conversation, to where I didn't confuse audiences, because I wasn't pivoting, I was adding to, and then
Right.
being able to add more experience and more depth in being able to deliver yes, you can do a business, you can build a business, and it doesn't matter if it's online or in person, both are viable.
Well, we've only talked for a little less than the hour. It's the first time that I've gotten to actually meet you and speak with you. And the one thing that is very clear is your grit and determination. And a common theme throughout all of what you've done is a decision and then action.
Yes.
And everything, I used to teach online, I used to teach small business entrepreneurship at the local community college. And, the one thing that all of these individuals came in wanting to be entrepreneurs, the one thing that they hated the most was the four-letter word work.
Yes.
You
Yes.
still had to go to work. And I would remind them that if you were giving the same effort to an employer as you're giving to yourself, you'd be fired
Yes.
because you're
Yes.
not going to work. And the fact that it's a common theme through everything that you've said here today: decision, action. And
Yes.
it's really, it comes through. I'm curious, You are a dynamo and a powerhouse, and
Mhm.
anyone who spends a few minutes talking with you can see that. How does that mirror what your husband does?
You
Is
know,
he the same whirlwind dynamo, or is he a little more laid back?
he's much more laid back. We've often chuckled on the fact that I'm the extrovert, he's the introvert, but he is my number one supporter. He is my greatest fan. He has on my days, and I get them too, where I'm just like, I don't think I can do this. I'm not sure I could do this. Like, I know you can. You just have to see it in yourself and you have to believe in yourself. He's like, but I'm going to 100% support you in whatever decision you make regarding any of your businesses or new businesses that come along. And and it's funny because I lean on him for certain things. The bread box, I'm like, babe, see what my kind of this image of what I'm looking for, what I'm kind of thinking of. Can you build that? He's all, sure, I'll do that. So he supports me in all capacities and has been such a uh I'm so grateful to be able to say that I have someone like that in my life that doesn't ever say you're crazy or you can't do that. I'm grateful that I don't have that because that does exist out there. But to anyone and everyone that listens to this episode and is an entrepreneur, you can do it. Even if you don't have a cheerleader in your corner, you can do it if you take action, because in the action, as you were saying, is where you grow, is where you learn. Sitting behind a screen or sitting in classrooms or taking as much knowledge in as possible is good to the point that you're going to take action on it. If you do not take action on it, then you cannot outlearn those that are taking action.
Yeah, and I think the hardest part for anyone is the fear of getting started. Will I, they don't, oftentimes they don't give themselves permission to fail.
Right. Right.
And everything has to be perfect, and I can't put it out if it's not well, right? And it doesn't even have to be a business, whatever it is they want to try.
Right.
I don't care if you're just trying to learn how to play golf, whatever.
Right.
You have to learn that failure is part of the process, and you have to be willing to be bad before you can be good, and then be good before you can be great. Everyone wants to go from zero to great, and they forget that, stuff in
It
the
doesn't
middle.
exist. Even
And
even the overnight successes took years to get there.
right, 20 years in the making.
That's right.
Like most entrepreneurs, eventually we get around to writing a book. Have you done that already?
So I did write a book. It's The Farm That Built Me is the name of it. And I don't advertise for it much because I did that when I didn't really have much audience. But when I wrote that book, I consulted to figure out how to do that because it was about my farm experience. And there are stories from the farm that I feel shaped me as a leader that I didn't see then, but looking back, I can absolutely critically say that that was my greatest learning curve, is my failure on the farm. But I thought, I don't have a farm. Mine was not successful. So how do I turn this into something that actually matters, makes a difference, and is possible for people to see the the horizon through the cloudy skies of, I didn't succeed as a farmer, but I also didn't go into that trying to succeed as a farmer either. I did had 160 acres, let's do something with it. I did write a book about that. And there's some gritty stories of farm life on there that were tough, tough learning curves. It's That's hard. That single-handedly, that experience of 4.5 years was probably some of the hardest to overcome, because there is a lot of things riding on your success or getting it perfect. And I didn't have success and I didn't have it perfect. And so I can see the outcome of failure immediately. And it's one thing if I fail, it's one thing if I let myself down, but it's another thing when I let animals down. It's another thing when I let people down. That's a whole different thing to experience. And these animals that we had in our care, they we were responsible for good stewardship of these animals and giving them the best life possible, an unconventional true to their species life. And yet at the same time, we had the hard days of going to slaughter. We had the hard days of them not knowing, but I always had conversations. I always move forward with making sure that that day is going to come, and that day is going to be swift, because I do not want my animals to suffer. I do, because I felt that was hard for me to let them down when they trusted us, and so in that book, I spoke a lot about that in each of the examples that I gave. So it's about 12 chapters. Each was a story from the farm. And then I ended each of those chapters with a leadership lesson. What did I learn from that lesson instead of the farm as a whole? What did I learn from that individual lesson? Because that's what I could take away. And boy, did it shape me.
I love everything that you're doing, and I love the energy and the spirit that you bring to life. You embody what I call living an authentic life. And
Yeah.
I wish more people had the courage to step out, right or wrong, good or bad, live your authentic life.
Yes.
And it's ironic to me that you are now kind of in the bread industry, because I use bread in my coaching when people talk about finding their voice and having someone listen to them, and why should I do it? And I always say, go to any bread aisle in any grocery store.
That's right.
There's 30 different kinds of bread, but they're all in plastic and they're all sliced, but somebody's
Right.
buying something different. So
Yes.
I use bread as an analogy all the time.
Great
So
analogy.
yeah, but I truly admire the grit that you show, and the determination. What's on the horizon as we approach into 2025? What's your next big adventure?
I'm going to enjoy the process, continue with what I do as a coach, and then enjoy the bread making process, and seeing what that looks like. I don't know. I have a few things. I'm not willing to hop those out there as far as how I expand the bread business itself, because of course I have a cap, but going commercial or going into retail is not my goal with it. I much rather have that, that one-to-one connection with the people. And that's where I want to keep it. So probably keep it somewhat on the smaller side. That way it's manageable with any other creative endeavors that come across my mind.
Open it up and free flow it.
That's
I
right.
love that.
Yeah.
If we were to give one piece of advice to a serial entrepreneur or a budding entrepreneur, or just someone who wants to follow their heart and their passion, because I don't think everything is meant to be a business, but I
Indeed.
do think we are meant to bring forth whatever purpose and passion is in our heart. What would you advise to someone who's a little further behind than where you are, and how to make their journey, more endeavorable?
Learn to trust yourself. Learn to trust that your decisions, your goals, your drive, your purpose, what you are seeking inside of all that is true to you and you alone. Do not let the outside influence of even high praise or high you know uh discouragement have any bearing on your decision. Take both of those in as they come, assess them, thank them, and then move on from it and continue on your path. Because the first thing that will move someone off and have them feeling disconnected to their purpose and their vision is when they listen to so much external information, good and bad, that keeps them pocketed in one spot. I had tons of people tell me, White, if you're really good at that, continue to do it. And yet I didn't want to stay there. I wanted to grow and evolve. And so for serial entrepreneurs, there is something to continue to build and grow that you are seeking in your own, as your own identity, and bringing that into the conversation, which is making you even bigger and fulfilling that vision. So stay with that, trust your gut, and follow that path. And even when people say you're really good at that and are, wonder why you walk away from something, or why you shift a little bit, or why you have a different conversation on something that they're used to, does not mean that anything other than they just don't understand this road.
Uh, my wife, like your husband, has been my biggest cheerleader and encourager. And without her, I wouldn't still be continuing this path. And But what I do know is that when I do pivot or change or modify, I then have to go back and explain to her why it's shifting and changing and
Right.
modifying
Right.
because her vision isn't the same as I. And Trent Shelton said it best. He said, "Stop trying to give your glasses to someone else to see your vision
Yep.
because your prescription was meant for you, not for them."
Yes.
And one of the hardest things that people learn along the way is that your biggest supporters and your biggest fans aren't necessarily going to be your family and friends,
Indeed. Indeed.
and because they just can't see what you see. So when you're fortunate enough to partner with someone who does give you that support, it
Yes.
is definitely a much more blessing.
Yes.
I'm going to ask you one final question that I ask all my guests.
Okay.
What does a warrior spirit or having a warrior spirit mean to White Dove?
Never settling for status quo.
Mm, I love that. Short and simple.
It's the way warriors do it. Let's keep going.
Well, it has been a pleasure to have you today, and we'll drop some links so people can connect with you. And I'm just grateful to finally be in your circle and have you in mine. And I look forward to what 2025 has to bring, and just continue to watch you blossom in the way you are.
Thank you so much for having me on today. It's been my pleasure to be here.
You've been amazing. So thank you, and you have a blessed rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.